Hi there, everyone. A huge welcome to the Guest List podcast with me, your host, Steve Guest. Really energized and excited to be talking to our guest today. A bit of an intro first. So the reasons behind this podcast and why I've started to talk to the guests and invite certain people on is purely down to the fact that I want to personally chat to people that inspire, motivate, and empower. But equally, I want to put that value back out there to you, the listeners, and continue on this journey of creating value and inspiring people. So I went out to my network and I said, who would you like to listen to? Who do you feel adds value in terms of top performance, top billers, high performance, motivational and inspirational coaches and leaders, and what separates those from the rest? The result of that post has got me talking to a great guy today who I've followed for a number of years, and I love following the content and the conversations through. So I'm going to give you a bit of a brief bio first. I don't know whether any of you can guess who it is before I shout the name out. So this person is a business psychologist, performance coach, public speaker and author, based originally in London, blending 20 years experience as an elite international sportsman and coach alongside 3 published books and an acclaimed TED Talk. First clue, his first name's Andrew. Innovative and straight-talking views on leadership, teamwork and strategy has resulted in the advice and guidance being sought after by key figures at several FTSE 100 companies. 1997, this person made the move to Canada to pursue a professional roller hockey career and developed his coaching skills. He succeeded in both, becoming the first British player to play professionally while his thriving coaching business was born. In 2004, he moved across into the corporate world as a sales and marketing consultant for Yellow Pages. 2007, unique and visionary approach in business saw him headhunted by a consultancy to speak about a winning mindset. It proved the spark that then lit the future career path. And just a year later, he developed a new method to enable elite athletes and business leaders to fulfill their potential. This was the seed that eventually blossomed into his renowned 4 keys method. And I imagine just for me saying 4 keys, you now know who it is. So welcome, Andrew Sillitoe. A pleasure to have you on today.
Steve, it's such a pleasure to join you on this podcast. You do such great work in the recruitment industry. So it's just such a pleasure to be here. And I've never actually heard anyone read that out loud.
Really?
So thanks.
Were you impressed?
Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I was, wow, is that me? Yeah, no, thank you.
Well, I think when I started doing these podcast interviews, I sat there and thought, the normal thing is to say, welcome, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah. And I think quite often we'll say it, certainly if you're kind of British as well, we're quite humble with it and we don't like to necessarily say everything.
That's true. And it's nice to get it all out of the way quickly and then get into the real work and add value to the listener. So you don't want to hear about me.
As I say, I've followed you for a long time. I'm genuinely excited to talk to you because there's so many things that you say and put out there that resonates with me. And I often find myself either repeating what you've said or looking back and thinking we're saying the same things, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what you tap into, that when it comes, to being a top biller, there's one thing, understanding the process. It's like an athlete, athletes know the game, they know the tactics, and as long as there's a level of skill, for the most part, they can implement it. But we know that 80% of it's mindset. And I think, that's what, when you talk about being a top biller, that, it's tapping into that is the game changer, right?
Yeah. I think as individuals as well, for me, I suppose I've had to coach myself on my mindset, and I've adapted and changed. I read a lot of books and I listen to a lot of audios, and it tends to be centered around successful people or people that are where I want to be. And I think the more you listen to different people saying the same things, you start to adapt it and take it on. When we talk about a winning mindset, and you talk about a winning mindset, what does that mean to you? What do you feel people need to have?
So I think it's starting with what it isn't as well. I think sometimes people think to have a winning mindset is about bravado. It's about being really bold and ruthless. And we see some people that display those types of behaviors that actually get results.
Yeah.
my view is that there's not a lot of longevity around it. I'm not sure if it's that much fun. I think it can cause a lot of stress to operate in that way. So for me, I've observed hundreds of athletes, hundreds of top performers, whether it's salespeople or leaders. And even if you look out into, the kind of humanitarian world, the likes of Nelson Mandela and these people that have just achieved amazing things, there seems to be three things that they have in common. The first one is they have absolute clarity around their purpose. So they know what their purpose in life is. And that's not like a goal. It's more like Simon Sinek's why. What's the purpose here? What am I here? What am I born to do? Whether you're Michael Jordan, in my world, Wayne Gretzky, or Warren Buffett, they kind of know what their role is, and they don't deviate from that. Now in careers, obviously that changes over time. So that's the first thing. So they're kind of goal orientated in that sense as well. So there's a balance between purpose and goals. But the second thing for me is just a really high level of self-awareness. So people that have, and I don't mean that they know their inner self, but they know their strengths and they play to their strengths. And I don't think recruitment or sports is any different in that respect. If I look at the top athletes who play in the highest league, you're always going to have the top 5% who have just got this flair. There's just something about them that separates them from everybody else. And you can put it down to work ethic or whatever. But the people that win the championship are the people that show up consistently. And they don't deviate from their strengths. They say, this is the type of player I am. This is what I'm good at. And as soon as I try and deviate outside that and be something I'm not, their performance drops. And I think recruitment's the same. You have recruiters who are really process driven, really analytical, incredibly result driven, and that works for them. Whereas if you've got someone who's a little bit more maverick and goes a bit native, or is more on the creative side, who tries to be more process driven because they told us what top billers do, then it feels a bit clunky. So
there's a struggle, isn't there?
There's a struggle, there's a tension there. So of course we've got to work on our weaknesses, but there's something about saying, well, what am I really good at, and how can I show up in the best possible way by playing to my strengths? So that's self-awareness and know what motivates you and so on. I think it's important. And then the third thing for me, and this is probably the one that differentiates all top performers, is the ability to manage their thoughts and feelings under pressure. And I think that is a learned skill. I think, you and I were talking about it a little bit offline, and that development of learning to compose ourselves under pressure, to focus on the things that we can control and influence, rather than get worried about things that we can't change. So for me, learning what triggers you, learning what triggers us is key. And then, how to use breathing techniques to compose ourselves and stay in the zone, if you like. So for me, being able to stay in the zone, self-awareness and purpose driven are the three things that really connect all top performers.
I think that third one, that learning to stay composed, is a really tricky thing to do. And I think many people struggle with that element. If I think back to, if I go back to 2012, I actually started trading currencies, and I was doing day trading. It was fast paced. It was high pressure. It was really difficult, and I did struggle, and I moved away from day trading quite quickly. But the biggest lesson I learned during that time was, you always see one trade as one trade in 1,000, and you don't put too much emotion on any win-loss on any particular one trade.
It's a long game. Yeah.
But I think taking it away from the trade perspective, and you just think about the fact that even from a recruitment perspective, it's making a single placement is great, but the fact is you will have placements that drop out. And if you're aware that they're not always going to be winners, you don't tie too much to it. And I think it allows, certainly for me, it allows me to keep my emotions in check. Because it's,
I think, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that, that's perspective, having a perspective, isn't it?
It's part of the process. It's like a step in the direction. It's like getting told no every time you make a call. Okay, well, the no becomes the not yet, becomes the yes. And I think it's just a step in the right direction.
But I think with trading, isn't it like 80% of trades are failed? You know, it's the
Yeah.
20% big ones that actually pay the bills. Yeah.
Trading is the most difficult thing I've ever done. And I think because I'm very analytical, because I like logic and I like things and believe things should go in a specific way, when you think you've joined all the dots and then it still fails, and you sat there thinking, but it was going to be a winner. How did it fail?
Yeah. I did the analysis.
Yeah, well, exactly that. And I really struggled because they call it back testing. I don't know whether you've ever been trading, but you back test.
I've been a day trader.
Okay.
And I've coached day traders. Yeah, but mainly on the S&P. So one of my first job in performance coaching actually was working with traders in Canary Wharf.
Yeah.
So that was my
I would back test strategies for 2 or 3 years on spreadsheets. I'd have numbers and stats all over the place. So I was backed up by the stats, knowing what I was doing. Yeah. But even then, I still struggled.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at 5-minute movements as well. I mean, that's.
I always remember. I remember a day, and my trade was winning. It was probably 200, 300 pips in the right direction, and I took a call. Went into the meeting room, came out the call, and the trade had lost and gone about 700 pips.
You had to stop in place.
And I was sat there massively in profit, and in 5 minutes I'd made the loss. And I was like, how do you cope? We've kind of digressed a little bit, but.
Well, no, but I think there's something about overcoming, like I always say to my team, you know, when I'm as in sports, you know, we're only as good as the next game, right? You know, regardless of whether we won the last game, lost the last game, you think of Roger Federer, you know, I think he's in his career has won like 53% of his points, you know, and we think he must be much higher. I think Tiger Woods has only won 25% of the tournaments he's played in. Okay. You know, you know, so I think your point is the word pertinent? I think it is right, because I think consultants who really feel the pain of a loss, or a leader, you know, I talked to a leader yesterday who is building a thriving recruitment business. You know, he's one of my clients, and it's great. Yeah. But all he can focus on is the people that left. You know, his attrition. So he's looking at. I'm like, you've got this thrive, you've got amazing culture. So, yeah, but I lost someone yesterday. I can't believe it. And I'm like, you know, they're on their journey, and overall, you're growing this credible business. So I think the brain is kind of hardwired.
It's strange, isn't it?
To gravitate towards negativity. Yeah. So things like trading and recruitment, where there are perhaps more failures than there are upsides, it's counterintuitive as humans to
it's strange how we think like that. I was just having a phone call conversation then about writing a book, and I was actually gave the story that my book's done really well, and it's been a really humbling journey. It's done far better than I ever anticipated or expected it to do. And about 3 or 4 months in, it had lots of Amazon reviews. It was 4 or 5 stars. It was being sold. I think it sold across 28 countries in 4 months, which was phenomenal. Amazing. And then I had one review that gave it 1 star, saying it was just a load of self-praise. There wasn't anything new in there. There wasn't anything that they took away from it. Wasn't worth buying. And honestly, that review stayed with me for months. And even now, it still has that little effect. And it's one in now is 230 reviews. Yeah,
it's still there though.
Amazing
still
how we attach ourselves to the little kind of digs. So
I
that kind of leads me on to. I've noticed you put a post out today, and it's something I talk about a lot in terms of self-limiting beliefs. And we as humans, I think, are constantly in almost like a self-preservation mode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we need to learn or almost detach ourselves to say, actually, if this is in the interest of us moving forward, how do we get past or over those hurdles? Why is it that we automatically just think, I can't do that? And it almost stops us in our tracks.
Yeah. So is that a question?
Yeah.
Why does it?
I mean, your view, obviously, having played at an elite level, you must have had days where you just doubt everything you're doing, and you're thinking, "Why am I putting myself through this?"
Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on how stretched we are. I mean, there are certain moments when I've been top of my game, but I'm in a situation where I think, right, this is a bit stressful. What's going on here? You know. But for the most part, I thrived on that as long as I trained. But I think there are times when we move into new areas. You know, you start a new job, or you move into a new industry, or you go into a new environment, And there are usually three things: fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of rejection. These are the things that, because of social status being so important to human beings, without a tribe, we would die. I mean, literally, if you weren't accepted into the tribe. So that DNA still runs strong. You join an organization, what do people think of me? And then and it's on a scale. So some people are more concerned with what people think, whereas some people are just kind of the other end of the scale, where they're not as concerned, but they've got their own internal recognition, which is just sometimes even worse for them, right? Because their own critic is on steroids. So they're the three things. But then we can get underneath it, and there's other kind of reasons why we might make excuses, not to engage in something. So that's the worst thing. There's one thing putting yourself out there and having a go at something and being nervous and fearful, but the worst thing is when we hesitate and procrastinate and don't have a go at something. Whether that's someone sitting there thinking, I think I'd like a career in recruitment or something else, and never picking up the phone or networking with somebody, or the fear of picking up the phone to speak to a certain client who could be your biggest deal ever. These moments and experiences just go past us. To me, that's worse. So learning to overcome that. So there's a bit of unpicking to understand where those excuses come from. And I'm a big fan of a book called Positive Intelligence, where he talks about 9 saboteurs. We all have these saboteurs, and we have in our head we have a judge and a sage.
Okay.
And we're trying to turn the volume down on the judge. And increase the volume on the sage. But the way he positions it is really interesting, and to try and compartmentalize the judge's voice. So in my mind, I might say something to myself saying, well, Andrew, that's, they're much better at that than you. They've been in the industry much longer, or they make more money, or they're just better at what they do. You have that imposter syndrome comparison. And what I've learned to do is say that's not me saying it, it's my judge.
Okay.
And my sage kicks in and says, okay, let's have some perspective here. And quieten the voice down on the judge. And the judge has started to sort of fade away over the years. But so I think there's something about this judge that is there to protect us, to keep us safe, that has been developed over years. You get into our 20s, 30s, 40s, in my case, and that has been there to aid us, and it's been an ally. But over time, it starts to become a saboteur. So you've got to look back. You're about to get into, it's not therapy, but sometimes just looking back and saying, how's my environment shaped my way of thinking? And what do I need to do to change that way of thinking, to transform into the version I want to become? And then you have to take that leap. You have to embrace the unknown.
That's the tough part, isn't it? That's the bit where people think, oh, I'm okay where I am, actually. Maybe I'll do it next week.
Safe. They're playing it safe. And we get one shot at this life, and all right, there's staying safe and having some certainty in our life is important, but not at the detriment of, your potential, your health, your family. We've got to look at a sort of bigger picture here as well.
It's so important, isn't it? And that whole story resonates with me, because we were talking off air, weren't we? I've always been the quiet person, and quite often when I was certainly going back maybe 15 years or so, I used to just tell people, oh, I'm a bit of a faffer. I think about things. I'm frightened to commit. I'm frightened to jump in. I'm very similar to how my dad was. I always tell people a story of my dad where he wanted to buy this car, and he went back to the car showroom probably 4 or 5 times over a period of about 6 weeks, and then was really annoyed when someone else bought it. I'm like, wait, you never went and did it. And I kind of had the same sorts of traits where I was very fearful of what people might think or what people might say. I was very quiet. I perhaps lacked a little bit of confidence. And I think probably, again, since my trading days, since that 2012, since I started investing in myself and mixing with different people, I've allowed other people to kind of push me a little bit and say, you need to be going doing that, go and do this, go and sort this out. And whilst I might still procrastinate a little bit, I've slowly got better and better. And now I'm at a point where I think, well, if I'm 75% there, I'll do it. If something frightens me, I just say yes. And then, as the saying goes, you worry about it afterwards. But it's not natural for me at all.
No.
And I
But
think,
you think about what you've done with the book. I mean, you've clearly overcome that.
yeah,
You know.
well, everything. I think even if you go back to the start of the pandemic, so March last year, live interviews, live talks, guest talks, creating a podcast. Obviously, the written book has formed the foundation, but these are all new to me. It doesn't come naturally. And I think
Right.
you work yourself up to do it by, I
Well,
suppose,
you've got to tear the
surrounding.
muscle, haven't you? You've got to
Yeah.
tear the muscle to make it stronger. And I think that's what people fear, that pain of pushing the weight, is, and I think there's something in that actually, that the change is a process. So I talk about change and transformation, two different things, but I think change is a process. So whether you're changing the culture, whether you're changing systems, whatever it is, or changing us personally, it's a process. And what I've learned is that until the pleasure of the new way of operating outweighs the pain of staying where you are, because there is pleasure in the pain of staying where you are, right? Whether it's staying in a relationship, staying in a job, avoiding something, laying on the couch at night watching Netflix. There's pleasure, even though we know that, oh no, it's 2 a.m. and I've got to get up at 6 and I really want to do my workout, and but I'm just too tired now. So, but until people say to me, how do you get up early and do the training? And I say to them that there was a time when staying up late and doing shots was great fun. At one point, I know it was my age, but there were times when that was good fun. But now, getting up in the morning in the dark, right now we've got 2.5 feet of snow here in Prague, to go into the park is much nicer for me than staying up until 2 o'clock. So until that new way of being, that better way of being outweighs the pain. So what tends to happen is that we kind of announce, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to be better at work, I'm going to be all in on I'm going to make those calls, I'm going to do it, and then so we announce that, and then what happens is we start to sort of panic, or we start to think, actually, this is more painful than not doing it. And then we start to create, what is that, like an amnesia. So hangover is a great example, right? How many times have you had a hangover and said, I'm never, ever drinking
Well, they
again?
last about 2 or 3 days these days. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that feeling, you're never going to do it again. And then a week later, a mate says, you want to go for a beer? And you go, oh yeah, sure. It's like, because the amnesia's kicked in, you completely forget
you remember the positives and forget the negatives, don't you?
Yeah. And the money use, the waste, all of that goes out the window, So there's this amnesia that kicks in, and then we start backtracking and saying, oh, it'll be all right, and it's all unconscious. So it's that moment where I think you're alluding to, which is where you've got to build that muscle to say, okay, I'm not doing that again. I'm pushing forward here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. You don't go into the gym and lift 300 pounds. You work with the weight you've got, but it tears the muscle a little bit. The muscle gets bigger. And I think habit stacking and all those sort of things are like that. You try something, it's a little bit painful. You mend and you go again. Like you said about the call, you make a few phone calls. The no's were painful last week. I avoided them, but now actually they're quite exciting because I know it's getting me to the yes or the maybe, So there's something in that around this kind of procrastination, hesitation, fear of the unknown, that we've got to cross that void and we just become a better version of ourselves.
I think so. I think what's helped me over the years is I now see it as a journey. I don't see it as something where I want immediate gratification. So I think even if everything today that I do is rejection and no's, it's just a step in the direction. Whereas I think if I come into the day thinking I'm going to rule the world today and everything's going to be great, which I kind of do anyway, because I have that positive mindset and it doesn't really affect me. Ultimately, I'm not putting too much expectation on actually if it all falls apart or I fail during the day or I don't get to where I want to get to. It's not going to change me at all for the next day. I'm still going to skip into work.
Yeah. And you're still the same person.
Yeah.
It doesn't define you. That's the thing. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's something in that the failures don't define us, but neither should the successes.
Yeah. But then at the start of my recruitment career, it very much did define me because I took everything personally.
Right. Yeah.
And I think as recruiters, we're quite often dealing with multiple parts, multiple emotions and things that are happening that can change at the drop of a hat. And I think we have to be adaptable to that. And when you don't have the experience or the knowledge of how to deal with certain situations, quite often we will always see it as our fault, and we take it to heart, or at least I did at the start. And I think a lot of new recruiters.
I think ambitious people do. People that want to do well, hyperachievers. The majority of people I work with they're all middle-aged hyperachievers who are now kind of saying, oh, what do I do now? This whole career has defined me. This is, and I don't have that. And I think there's a lesson there, whether you call it growth mindset or whatever, but that people can learn from you, which is, this doesn't define you. You are who you are. This is your job, whether you win, lose. And it's the same, a lot of the work that we do with athletes when they end their career is, well, who am I? Because they've spent so much time defining themselves by being the top goal scorer, the best defender, the toughest guy on the pitch, and all of a sudden they're just left with being, well, now I'm a father or a wife, or I'm a mother, or so
that must be really difficult.
Completely different. I think it's a really tough transition.
Yeah.
And I actually see it in recruitment when consultants move into leadership roles.
Yeah.
Because I'm a leader now, I'm off the tools. But the thing that really defined me was the fact that I was a top biller.
Yeah.
And now I've got to be this leadership, so that I see it in all different types of change and transition where people have become too attached to the result.
Yeah.
We do it with our kids. The school system drives it with kids. So it starts from a young age that, you're academic, you're sporty, you're this,
Yeah,
you're not.
You're labelled, aren't you?
Exactly. So they grow up with that. And so then the psychology is that we have to get reward by being more academic or being more sporty or because that's how I get, or actually I'm naughty.
Yeah.
So when I play up and act up in work, that's how I get attention.
Yeah.
So it's hardwired stuff.
We are a crazy bunch, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of, you mentioned about making decisions and things, I think, again, that leads itself to performance, because in my experience, high performers, people that are at the top of their game, are ones that go out and take action, and they make a decision, whether it's right or wrong, and they sink and swim by the decisions they make, or at least they find solutions should it not be the right decision at the time. Would you say that's a similar sort of finding for the people that you deal with?
Yes, I think there's, making a decision, taking that. I mean, that you're not going to get results unless you take action. I mean, that is reality. And, but I think there are ways of, I put something out this morning, I'd rather be going slowly in the right direction, 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Particularly if I go too far. Now there's, sometimes we have to go fast, make a decision, go. But what doesn't happen is the review, the self-analysis, and that's where sports and business is very different. We sports, it's all videoed, it's all there. The evidence is there. You watch it, you review it. You think, I sucked in that game. I shouldn't have made that decision. I shouldn't have done that. I was good at that. You've got a coach to help you. We probably don't do that enough in business. I know we've got better technology, whether it's Q19 or something like that, there's something that give us some data, or the coaches are there. But it also requires letting go of the ego, to be able to have that self-reflective nature. And what we often see and this is a sweeping statement, but in people who are more dominant, more result-driven, tend to be less inclined to stop, reflect, and look in the mirror and say, I'm good at this, but I'm not so good at that. They tend to just keep going. Yeah. So, and that goes back to my original point about, being ruthless and driven, and that they're good traits, but we've got to learn to build in the ability to reflect, to observe ourselves, to have someone to ask for feedback, for someone to say, look, there's some things you've done really well, but clearly we need to do some work on this, and to be able to say, okay, well, thank you for that, because I didn't know. Rather than go, well, I don't know what you're talking about, because that's not me.
It works. It works the way I do it. Why would I change?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And that's rife in recruitment. I often talk about recruiters being like your high D in your disc profiles. It's that dominant personality. It's about relationships. It's about being loud and brash. And
I have to be careful. As a business psychologist, that's a sweeping statement, but it's true. In recruitment,
it is. And I think, even when I joined, I'm a high C.
Right.
spreadsheets, process, logic, structure. That is me. And I was very different. And I think working with people that are high Ds and being surrounded by high Ds probably made me even quieter because I just knew
Right.
I couldn't compete. But
Right.
you have to
And C
compete.
is compliance, isn't it? So
Yeah.
you comply. Yeah. So it might make
Yeah.
you withdraw from that loud, brash
Oh,
noise.
definitely.
Yeah. I
I
see that
would
a
be
lot in recruitment.
but at the same time, I'm still assessing everything that's going on. I'm making the notes. I'm creating almost what I'm going to say when perhaps the room quietens down.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's understanding, I think, it was very useful doing those sorts of disc profiles because it gives, I suppose, a backing to why you are, and
Yeah.
therefore you can build on your attributes and actually put them to use.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to my point around a winning mindset. Is one of them is self-awareness, and and a tool like that can help
Yeah.
because it can help you kind of have a reference point of what your preferences are
Yeah.
and play to those rather than trying to be something we're not.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
obviously you've had a great career from both a sporting and mentorship coaching perspective. You've dealt with some elite athletes and elite performers in terms of business. What would you say, or who would you say has perhaps been the biggest inspirations during those times? Are there two or three people that are just stand out and you think they've made a real difference?
Mm. Well, the first person has to be my godfather, although technically he wasn't my godfather, but we just had that relationship. His name was Jock, and he was the first one that got me into training, got me to really think seriously about my training when I was 15, 16. But when my father died, when I was 16,
Yeah.
I kind of attached myself to him, and I would go there every night and train.
Yeah.
And through a conversation once, I just said that I was coaching quite a young age, and I was coaching my team, and I just found it really hard because we'd fall out. You know, they're my mates, and we would just fall
Yeah.
out, and there'd be a lot of tension. And he said, "Here's a book for you. I think you'll find it useful," because I was the same. And it was the classic Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Okay.
And from that moment, I think I've got goosebumps thinking about it. I was probably 18, 19. At that point, I realized I was going to be a coach. Like, I didn't know what, business, I had no idea, but coaching. So that's a Jock man, and I dedicated both my books to him. My coach at GB, you know, when we really started getting serious, he taught me how to be selfless. You know, I was pretty selfish. You know, I was on my own journey, and I wanted to win, and I was
Yeah.
very motivated. I thought that everyone else was lazy, and I was, you know, and I didn't tolerate laziness. And I can't understand why people ate the food they did and didn't train the way they did. And I was one of those in the dressing room. And
Yeah.
he just taught me to let go of that. His name is Mark Cavillin. Just a brilliant guy who taught me so much. And also when I moved into the leadership role for Team GB, which was 15 years after he was my coach, I adopted a lot of his, actually no, it was only 6, 7 years. But yeah, he was a kind of legacy for me. So I brought a lot of that to my leadership. So they're probably the two standouts. I mean, there are multiple people sort of in my life. My mum is my hero, right? I mean, she's just incredible, strong woman. I think COVID's gone. She had COVID, she's 78, and it's like she's had such a tough life, and it's COVID like just picked on the wrong person. So
I think it's a generation thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You know, so there are multiple people, and we were talking about this today. I don't know if you're in Clubhouse, but about coaches and mentors and the difference between having a coach and a mentor. I've got a life coach, I've got a mentor, I've got a business coach, and they all play different roles in my life.
Yeah.
And they've changed over time. So, and I'm sure that I will have other mentors in the future who will inspire me.
It's a great thing to have, and I really only started on that sort of journey probably 5 years ago, and I've got various mentors in different places, and they don't have to be almost kind of that face to face, and you have that accountability part to it. I've learned that they come in all shapes and sizes, and it could be just people that you follow on social media, it could be the books that you read, but actually they start to almost engulf your way of life because the messages are positive and they're good and they're leading you in the right direction. And I think up until then, I never really read books. I didn't really do the things that I'm doing now. But I think finding that ability to have people you're accountable to, people that have trodden the path before you that can say, this is how I would do it. These are the mistakes I made and these are the lessons that I learned. But I still think very few people do it.
Yeah, I think I think people are more open to it now. I think that we're seeing certainly more business owners seek out mentors. I certainly think, people, if I'd go back, because the mentors in my life, they were kind of organic, they were just there. I don't think I didn't say that's my mentor.
Yeah.
But I wish I'd said at 21, 22, someone had said to me, look, you really should think about getting a mentor. What do you want in life? Is it to pursue a hockey career? Is it to pursue entrepreneurialism? Because, I always had that entrepreneurialistic view of life, and I wanted to build businesses, and I was good at it quite young, but hockey was always the thing that trumped everything for me. It was always the focus.
Yeah.
So I think having someone, I think it's good advice for any, making an assumption that consultants are anything between 19 to 30, that are coming into the industry or whatever, to think about, that seriously. Find a mentor, whether it's someone in your network that you can just bounce ideas off once a month, or someone you actually invest in.
Yeah.
But I think it could just really accelerate and also keep them mentally well.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important, certainly given the last 12 months as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's been incredibly tough in so many areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And people like to mentor. That's the thing. You reach out to someone, people like it. It's like if they got the time.
Completely. As I say, I've been on a journey the last 12 months with everything that's happened, and having and being accountable to people and being their accountability mentor alongside coaching and adding value is massively rewarding for both coach and mentee. And it's a fantastic journey to be a part of. And if you're not, then you should gravitate towards that anyway.
Yeah, and great coaches learn. That's the thing as well. If you're someone out there that's thinking, I'd quite like to be a coach, just get out and offer coaching, because you learn so much. My game, I think, improved when I started coaching. It's like, because you have a different perspective. So I think there's huge value in being a coach and being curious and learning from people. I learned so much from my business owner community, about business, and we're constantly sharing ideas. It's just a great way to learn.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to offer a massive thank you for chatting to you today. I could talk to you all day. I think there's so many things, and as I say, having followed you across your social media platforms, there's not a single post that goes by where I'm not looking at it. I think we've private messaged a few times on your training routines and various things over time. I think the content and value you put out is amazing, and people should be following you. Is there a place where you generally direct people to if they're looking to follow your path and get
just a website? I mean, obviously anyone can connect me on LinkedIn, but andrewsillitoe.com is always a good starting point. There's loads of content on there. You can catch up with podcasts and blogs, and I blog every day. So I have a daily blog. It's a short one. So if people want that content into their inbox, they can sign up to that. But andrewsillitoe.com is the best place to go, and you can sort of decide where you want to go from there.
Great stuff. And if I always ask if there's one thing that you leave our listeners with today. So bearing in mind, I would think the majority are going to be recruiters, young and old. What's that one bit of advice you'd say to go out and do or take away from today?
Cool. I would think about those three things I shared. One, why are you here? What's your purpose? So whether you're, as a recruiter, who are you serving? Think about your clients. So don't worry about whether you're going to hit target or not. Just focus on how you serve your clients and candidates. That's getting outside our head. In sports, we say stop worrying about how you're going to perform. Serve the players in the dressing room.
Yeah.
So look at it from that perspective. Get out our head. Play to your strengths, and just think about how you will learn to cope with pressure. It's a really good skill to have, whether you call it mindfulness, meditation. We've got laughed out the dressing room 20 years ago talking about meditation. Now every guy on my team, would be thinking about it, visualization practice, so those three areas I think are key. That's
fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Steve. Keep doing the great work. Cheers.
will do.
Thanks a lot.